You know that Keeley Companies is all about fostering the world-class culture through their incredible cultural pillars. Well, it was time to add a seventh cultural pillar, Keeley Green. Guided by the mission to raise the sustainability standards by which they design, build, operate, and live, Keeley Green is dedicated to using a holistic approach to leave a positive impact on our environment, create a future that is sustainable for generations to come. In the words of Rusty Keeley, we are just getting started. You can learn more about that just getting started mentality and all the work they do by visiting my friends at Keeley Companies online at keeleycompanies.com.
Welcome to the Live Inspired podcast with John O'Leary. John is the two-time national best-selling author of On Fire and In Awe. He's a world-class inspirational speaker, the host of the Live Inspired podcast, and he's the real-life inspiration behind the major motion picture Soul on Fire. Each week, John interviews extraordinary individuals about their life stories so you can more fully live your life story. Here's your host, John O'Leary.
Hello, my friends, and welcome to the Live Inspired podcast with John O'Leary. Our guest today's name is Jason O. Harris. Jason is a retired lieutenant colonel, a fourth-generation service member, professional pilot, best-selling author, and nationally sought-after keynote speaker on trust and leadership. Jason spent nearly 3 decades serving our country in the United States Air Force, flying 11 combat deployments, and then more than 470 combat sorties. Ultimately, commanding a Boeing KC-46 tanker aircraft squadron. He carries those hard-earned lessons beyond the cockpit and into boardrooms, equipping leaders and teams to build trust, accountability, and peak performance when it matters most. Today, Jason joins us to share how trust is built under pressure, why leadership is revealed in moments of uncertainty, and what it truly means to make the dash count. You're going to love this idea. He opens up about growing up in chaos. Wait until you hear where this man came from, learning the power of environment and influences early in our life, and how high-risk combat missions shaped his belief that you don't rise to the occasion. You fall to the level of your training. It's a very important concept to understand, teachers, parents, veterans, servants, family, and friends. You don't rise to the occasion. You fall to the level of your training. My friends, if you are craving clarity in your leadership, confidence in your decisions, or stronger relationships at work and at home, this conversation is for you. You will leave with a renewed understanding of how trust is earned, practical ways to show up with intention, and a powerful reminder that your presence matters more than you think. So buckle up. Our Lieutenant Commander is about to join us right now, Lieutenant Colonel Jason O. Harris. Welcome to the Live Inspired podcast with John O'Leary.
Thank you so much for having me on, John. It's an absolute pleasure, and I'm humbled to have the opportunity to have a great conversation with you today.
Oh man, I've been following your work for a long time, and I can't wait to share your life story with our audience. But before I rewind the tape a little bit and talk about your childhood and what led you into the service you currently offer today, I'd like you to sort of introduce yourself. If you and I were to meet randomly, maybe going through TSA. Okay, so now we're on the other side, we're waiting for our bags, and I say, I'm John, what's your name? And you say, Jason. I say, Jason, tell me about you.
Well, first thing that would probably happen is you would say, "Hey, how's it going?" And I'd say, "Hey, it's a great day to be alive." And then from there, what I would tell you is, for me, I'm a guy who's looking to make an impact in the world. And I live by the idea and the mantra that we only get the dash that we're given between the day we're born and the day we die. And I want to make certain that my dash counts in this world. And if that means meeting John today while we're waiting on our bags in TSA, and I can make an impact on you that could reverberate to impact others, then I've made my dash count today.
Mm. Man, I love the fact that you did not begin with your rank, which would impress people and will impress people when they hear it, or the fact that you're already in uniform because you're going to fly us to where we're going next, or the profound work you've done, but you're celebrating the moment and you're celebrating the person in front of you. And I think when people hear your backstory, they're going to be even more amazed that that's what you're trying to do, live that dash well.
So let's leave the airport together and go back in time a little bit. I've been in Oakland probably 25 times. And I think it's just a cool community, but I'm kind of in and out pretty quickly usually. You grew up there, and for you, it was somewhat of a chaotic childhood. Talk about growing up in Oakland.
Oakland is, if you remember from The Lion King, where, he's sitting there with Simba and Mufasa sitting there with Simba, and he says, Simba, look out there. You see that land? That's the land that we don't go to. The running joke for a lot of us from Oakland, from where I grew up at, is that's how people view us in Oakland. That's the land you don't go to in the neighborhood that I grew up in. But, I grew up, my grandfather was retired from the army, served in Vietnam, served in Korea. And, what I tell people is that I'm number two of my mother's six children and the product of three marriages and four fathers or six children. And so for me, the first part of life growing up in Oakland was interesting. I watched my uncles in and out of jail. I watched my uncle selling drugs. I had to walk past the projects to go to school each day up until I was in third grade, when my mom enlisted in the army to get us out of Oakland. And that's just kind of just a simple snapshot of growing up in Oakland. But, you're a baseball guy and the connection when I watched your story, the connection that I got was for me as a kid, I could walk to the Oakland A's stadium. Of course, none of the professional teams are in Oakland anymore, and that's heartbreaking. But I used to be able to
Yeah.
walk to the Oakland A's stadium. Some days we get there early, man. I think we pay $3 or $5 for a bleacher seat, and we'd watch, Reggie Henderson and these other guys practicing in the outfield. And then I was the crazy kid, my brothers tell the story as a crazy kid that I would stay after the games for hours waiting by the locker room to try to get autographs by these players. And two different times, which is insane to think about, this little kid from the inner city streets of Oakland, I not only got autographs from significant players, but one of them that you definitely know, Mark McGuire, like throws me in his white IROC Z. He had a white one and a black one at the time. And this was little Mark, not big Mark, right? And he throws me to IROC Z, man, and we ride around the stadium and he, just signs an autograph and he says, "Hey kid, keep your head up and do good things." And so that was kind of just a snippet of the childhood that I grew up with in Oakland.
I've heard you describe it several times as chaotic. So I'm hearing you talk about your uncles and the projects and drug deals and it's easy to just kind of breeze through that. I'm glad you got the autographs. I'm glad you got to the ball games. I'm glad little Mark McGuire was kind to you a couple times. And yet it was a difficult childhood. When you're living in chaos, do you know it?
I don't think you know it on one hand, you don't know it. On the other hand, you do know it. And what I mean by you don't know it is because it's your norm. And
Right.
let me be really clear, right? Like I didn't grow up in like a crack house. I experienced being in a crack house at 7 years old with someone, but I didn't grow up in that space, right? My grandma and grandfather were married. They took care of us, and my grandfather was that father figure in my life. My mom was always working, trying to make ends meet and take care of us, and I didn't grow up in the chaos per se in my home,
Right.
but I saw it around us. I remember different places that I would go to as a kid. And I remember the first time that I saw someone pull out crack rocks from their sock on the basketball court at the local neighborhood park. I remember seeing the cops rush through our neighborhood. I remember seeing police brutality on the streets right around where I grew up at. I remember walking through the projects and seeing the chaos that was the projects that we grew up in that was part of the onset in the genre of rap music from the Bay Area where they talked about it. And I knew about it. And some of those people I knew and saw as I grew up. So when I say chaos, it's like that. But I think when we're in the midst of something, it's kind of like that saying, when you're in the glass, when you're in the jar, you can't see the label and you can't tell a fish about water. The fish is like, well, what are you talking about? And I think when you're in that space, you just kind of go along to get along and you just kind of figure out how to maneuver through it.
You mentioned your mother enlisted in the army pretty much to get you out of this situation. It eventually leads you to Texas. You're a California kid, man. You're an Oakland kid. You grew up in the Bay Breeze in your face, and now you're living in Texas. What was that move like for you?
Well, first and foremost, the drive from California to Texas was the most boringest, longest drive ever. I'll start with that. But for me, there was this idea, when as a kid, you watch TV and you see these TV shows. So you'd see Westerns And in my mind, Texas was going to be a Western. In my mind, it was going to be rattlesnakes, rattlesnake cowboy boots and horses. And it wasn't. We were on a military base and there were people from all different walks of life, all different parts of the country and then the world. And I got put into this environment where I had to figure out how to make friends in a different capacity. I realized that I had learned a lot growing up in Oakland and I could translate a lot of those skills that I had learned up until the age of 8. I mean, I could get on the city bus in Oakland and go wherever I wanted. I could figure things out and I could run the city. And so when I got to Texas, living on this military base, I realized that these skills came in handy. And I realized that I had some assets that some of these other kids who might have lived a sheltered life, they didn't have.
Right.
And so for me, it was just this whole other space and place. And my older brother and I, we would explore like the trails where the tanks would drive around for the training and such. It was a new world, but also a new community that began to surround me and help me to develop my mind, develop my thoughts and my dreams to figure out how I could go further in life.
What about the role of horses in your life?
Horses played a significant role in my life and understand this, like when I left California, you asked that question. When I left California, there was one thing that I wanted to do, and it was to ride a horse. I left California in third grade. I didn't get the chance to ride my first horse until I was in eighth grade. And that came because I had gotten in trouble. I got kicked out of school in sixth grade, and I also got kicked out of school in seventh grade by the same principal. There's another story that goes with that, but I'll spare you the details for now. And
I've
so
actually
in
heard you
eighth,
share it before, man. It's worth
oh,
sharing.
wow. Yeah, in eighth grade, I'm in trouble again and I'm fastly on my way to getting kicked out of school. I'm thinking about selling drugs, not because I have to, but because I kind of want to prove to the kids that I can do better than they could, because I got to witness it firsthand in Oakland in comparison to Texas. And so in my mind, I'm like, let me do this. And I get in trouble. I meet this gentleman, Mr. Ron Foster, and he says, hey, man, he says, I got a deal for you and all these kids that are in trouble. Stay out of trouble. You can come out and hang out, see my horses. I'll put you around professional athletes. He's a basketball coach. And I thought, that sounds exciting. The horses first and then professional athletes. Okay, whatever. So I go out there and I see the horses and I just fall in love. And then they make me a deal. They go, look, you got to clean up and shovel a lot of horse poop. But if you do a good job, if you learn how to take care of the horses, then we'll teach you how to ride the horses. And then it became this carrot for me. And as they lured me with this carrot, because it was something that I had already always dreamed about,
Right.
then it was every weekend I was out at the horse stables. And it was the horses that actually saved my life because it kept me out of the streets, kept me from selling drugs, kept me from getting kicked out of school again. And literally, the horses, they came into my life at a time where I most needed them to be in my life, and they saved my life.
Wow. You mentioned your mother joined the military, she joined the army. You have a lineage of family members who have served our nation. I'd like you to walk through now 4 generations, but let's begin with your mom and we'll go backward in time. Like, talk about your mom's service to the nation.
My mom, I give her so much credit because most people join the military when they're young. But my mom chose to join the military when she was almost 30 years old, single parent, had 3 kids, 3 boys at the time. And initially, she wanted to join the Marine Corps. And the Marine Corps says, you can't join unless you give up custody of your kids. And she goes, I'm not doing that. And then she goes to the Army, and the Army says, well, if you give up temporary custody, then you can join the army. And so she says, deal. So she gives temporary custody to my grandmother. She goes off to basic training, goes to advanced training, comes back, says, hey, I love you kids. By the way, I'm heading to Korea for a year. So she
Wow.
goes over to Korea for a year, serves, comes back. And then from there, we went to Fort Hood, Texas. She served for, I believe, a little over 7 years. And the decision that my mother made to join the military when she was nearly 30 years old likely saved her life, likely saved my life, my older brother, my younger brother, and then created the space and opportunity for her to have my other 3 siblings. And
Wow.
so, what she did to serve this nation, what she did as, understanding that her father served, but then also understood that it was an opportunity for her to serve honorably and to make a difference for her children. I could never repay that to my mother.
You mentioned this, so I'd like you to go a little bit deeper into it. Your grandfather also served. And African American gentleman at a very divided time in our nation's history says, "Yeah, I'm going to serve our country."
Yeah. So the interesting thing is that my grandfather is one of 10 boys that were born into their family. I forget how many total children were born into his family, but there were 10 boys. He might have been the oldest. He actually passed my senior year in college. But my grandfather, it served in Vietnam. He only served one tour. And part of the reason he only served one tour, because at the time there were a few of his other brothers in Vietnam, and they came out with that rule with one boy could be
Yes.
in combat at a time. And so the other boys decided that they would leave the youngest, my uncle who retired in Colorado, he stayed. But my grandfather did Vietnam. He served in the Korean conflict. And what I learned was that he lied about his age at the age of 16 so that he could enlist in the army to get out of Wilmington, North Carolina, because he grew up in chaos. His old man, his father was a bootlegger. We don't know what his father was. They would, but
Yes.
he was a bootlegger and there was some interesting things. And they grew up in chaos and he wanted to get out of there. And so he joined the military at 16 years old. And he actually was, which is really a cool connection, is he was in the original Army Air Corps and then transitioned over to the Army and did a career. And the funniest thing, I'll tell you this, John, that I laughed about was when he passed, we looked at his records. Keep in mind, he passed my senior year at the Air Force Academy. And when you graduate the Air Force Academy, you instantly become an officer. And when we reviewed his records, he got into some trouble during Vietnam. He was working a part time job at the exchange, or what's called the store on the base. And he gets into it with this officer. And he basically tells this officer off and says, "All you officers are garbage," and something to that effect, probably with a few more choice words. But I thought how interesting that his grandson's has graduating, went on to become an officer.
Whew. It's amazing how the roots we grow from ultimately form the fruits that we become. It takes a
Hmm.
long time to get there and it's awkward and wavy, but give it time and watch what can happen. It's a remarkable story. And not only did your mother and grandfather serve, but your great grandfather.
Yeah. So, like I said, 4 generations. I don't know very much about my great grandfather's service, because I never had a chance to meet him. I never had a chance to get those stories. I know my grandfather's service. I know the service of a lot of his siblings. And then my mother served, and I believe three of her brothers served, one of them having retired from the Navy and having worked on aircraft carriers. And so for me, and in my generation, in my family, immediate family of my siblings, I'm the only one who served. And I think of my first cousins, to my knowledge, only one other first cousin of mine served in the military. And so, for me, I'm full of gratitude for the legacy and the lineage that I come from,
Yeah.
and full of gratitude that I got to serve this nation. And to your point, in a divided space where sometimes we don't want to have a conversation with someone because perhaps we think that they don't believe what we believe, and we think that they have a certain perspective, and we think that they view us a certain way. you know, for me, I got to serve and I got to meet people from all walks of life, and I got to
Yeah.
lead people from all walks of life. And it's something that I'd do all over again if was given a chance.
Well, and we hear folks commonly say it's never been as divided as these days. And to those folks, I encourage them, go hang out with your grandfather when he was enlisting in the mid 60s. Go hang out with your great grandfather when he was enlisting in the 40s. Like we have lived in struggled, divided, difficult days, and we will continue to live in these difficult days. And yet there are good people stepping forward saying, and we can do better, and we can do better. So you become one of these leaders. You ultimately say, I'm going to go Air Force. Why Air Force?
Well, a couple of reasons. Number one, my mother said, "Son, if you can go in the military, go in the Air Force." She says they got an office environment and they take care of their people. And then she said, "Son, if you can go in the military, go in as an officer." Of all the times that I disobeyed my mother, those two things I listened to. And the interesting, funny thing was, when I was applying to college, I applied because I knew that that was part of the recipe based on what I knew at the time for success. And so my first college choice was Texas A&M. I wanted to go be an Aggie so bad I could taste it, and they had turned me down. But I had also applied to all of the other service academies, and I realized Coast Guard and the Navy, I'd have to be on a boat. I couldn't swim that well, and I couldn't drink that much water. The Army, I knew that lifestyle having grown up around it, and I didn't want to carry my belongings on my back, and I didn't want to sleep outside in the dirt for a living. And so here it was, the Air Force was making me an offer I couldn't refuse, and I made that choice and forever grateful for having made that choice and having that opportunity.
It has led to so many blessings in your life, including, I think you were at a stereo shop, a random encounter with a lady who eventually you would marry.
Yeah, my beautiful wife of 20 years, we've known each other for 25 years. February 11th, 2000, I walk into a stereo shop. I had an 84 Buick LeSabre. I wanted to put a nice stereo system in the back of the car. She already had a really nice
Our
stereo
younger
system in
listeners
the
have no idea what you're talking about right now, but I'm taking notes over here.
Yeah, totally clueless, right? And
Right.
so my wife had, she had subwoofers in the back of her car that she had blown out and she was getting them repaired. And so I see this young lady and I just make a passing comment. Quite honestly, I thought she was out of my league, John. And so I just say, "Hey, you look bored." And I didn't think anything of it. I wasn't trying to hit on her. She starts talking back. We proceed to start having a conversation. And back in the day, they had these decals on the cars for military members. And the color at the bottom of the decal was indicative of the rank of the person who owned the vehicle. And so you knew blue was an officer, and then red or yellow was enlisted.
Yeah.
And hers was either red or yellow. I can't recall which color it was. And so immediately I go, "Hey, are you in the military?" And then she goes, "No, I'm not in the military." And I go, "Oh, well, is your boyfriend or significant other in the military?" She goes, "No, I don't got no boyfriend." And then she realizes what I'm asking. She goes, "I'm in college." And I go, "Well, I kind of perk up a little bit." She goes, "Oh, that thing. My dad's in the military, my dad's retired." And I go, "Oh, cool." So we continue to have a conversation, get her phone number, and we went on a date and talked for the whole night. And from there, I invited her to go to what's called ring dance, which is just prom for college kids at the Air Force Academy, where we get our class rings. And the rest is history, as they say.
What, without going into elaborative details, what is it about her and her love of good stereo equipment outside of her physical beauty? What is it about her that you're still wild about?
Her mind, her intellect. She's a brilliant person. She's a kind person, and she's a very thoughtful person. And so for me, what I realize is that with her, I get somebody who is not just beautiful in terms of the external beauty, but it's the internal beauty, and not just the internal beauty of kindness, but also the idea of her mind and how she thinks and how she rationalizes through things.
Hmm.
And that has made a significant difference for me and my level of success that I've been able to achieve. And so that allows us to still really like each other. We love food, we love wine, we love traveling. And, in our most challenging times being married, as long as we've been married, what we realize is that you can love someone from afar, but to actually be with them in close proximity, you got to like them. And
Mhm.
in our most challenging times, what we realize, John, is man, we actually still like each other. And to me, that's invaluable.
Hmm. Any advice, and this is not a dating program, but here we come. Any advice on liking your partner? What are some ideas that, for those of us who stepped in either for lust or love, we forgot about the like part? What are things you do to make sure you keep liking your wife?
Be intentional. Be intentional in every aspect of your life. When it comes to relationships, and it doesn't matter if it's the relationship at work, if it's your significant other, if it's your child, it doesn't matter. Family members, we have to be intentional to grow together, especially if it's your significant other. If you're not intentional, no matter how much you think you like someone, if they go one direction, you go the other direction, they're going to fastly become your insignificant other.
That's right.
And so for me, I give you a classic example of what happened. Just one example of something that happened along in our relationship when it comes to intentionality and time. Well, I was into shooting guns. I was getting into the special operations world, and I had a dream come true where I'm getting to learn how to shoot with the best in the world. A guy who was a retired Delta Force training sergeant major. The guy was an incredible shooter, an incredible trainer. And I'm getting to go shoot with this guy every Saturday, him and a couple of other buddies that were special operations. And as we're getting to do that, I would not only spend the time, I would spend the money. And eventually, a few months go by, and my wife goes, "Hey, honey, I need to talk to you." I go, "What's up?" She goes, "Here's the deal." She goes, "I love that you're having a good time going shooting, but let me explain to you what's really happening. You go shooting all day, you're out there in the sun, and then you come home, you're tired and exhausted, and then we don't get to go have fun and enjoy dinner together. Now, you can choose, make your own choices, but I just want you to know how that makes me feel." And I thought, oh, wow. And so, suffice to say, I pretty much gave up that level of shooting because I valued her friendship, and I valued the time together. And I wanted to make certain that I stayed intentional with that relationship and not allow it to drift apart because I wanted to do what I want to do and only focus on me.
Such a good story. May 2001, you graduate Air Force Academy, second lieutenant. Congratulations on that. And then 3 months later, September 11th, 2001, the world changes, and so does yours. How did 9/11 change your world specifically?
It changed my world dramatically in an instant. I remember exactly where I was at when the buildings were hit. I remember turning on the TV at my then girlfriend, now wife's apartment. I remember us getting recalled to the base. I I remember we didn't know what was going to happen, but we knew that our lives as newly minted officers was going to be forever changed. We didn't know at what point we would see combat, but the reality was that at some point that would probably happen. And so for me, my life changed because all the pilots that I looked up to, these C-130 pilots that I wanted to become, they told cool stories about traveling around and doing logistics milk runs. Well, my career wasn't like that. My career flying C-130s and special operations was all in the Middle East primarily. And so 11 deployments later, that was the fruit of what that one day became as a result. And so, yeah, you don't know what to look forward to when you become a lieutenant. You know that you're going to lead, but if you're not in war when you graduate, you don't expect to go to war that soon.
Yeah.
And so, I graduated 2001, went to pilot training, graduated there in 2002, and in 2003 there I was in combat flying combat operations in the Middle East.
So I'm a goofball and I love our military, man. I also love aviation within it. So I know about the C-130. I would imagine many of our listeners and viewers don't. Succinctly explain to us what a C-130 is.
C-130 is a four-engine propeller-driven aircraft. It is meant for tactical operations, so moving people short distances, a few hours to and from various installations and forward operating bases. We can also put paratroopers in the back, kick them out of the back of the airplane, kick them out of the sides of the airplane, and we can also kick vehicles and other equipment and materials out of the back of the airplane while the aircraft is flying through the sky. It's 150,000 pounds normally, fully loaded, 155,000 pounds in a combat environment, and we can land on dirt, grass, gravel, you name it, in those 3,000 feet and turn around and take off and do it all over again.
So in '07, so this is now 4 years after you've been flying the C-130, you get pivoted a little bit in your career to be part of Special Forces. Talk about that move and what did that mean for you, for what you were flying, for how that impacted you, for the guys you were leading.
Yeah, so 2007, I get this special invite to go into special operations. And it was interesting for the fact that I had known tangentially about these other people out there that were doing cool things. And I remember knocking on their door, talking to some of my buddies that were doing it, and they said, "Hey, man, we can't really tell you what we do. Don't call us, we'll call you," kind of deal. And I go, "Okay, great." And I remember talking to my wife about it. My wife says, "If I knew you wanted to do that, I would have never married you." And I was like,
Yeah.
"Oh, well, I guess I'll just forget about that." And then a year later, I get this random phone call from a random blocked number, and I take the phone call and I get this invite. I get accepted to be in this very, very specialized program flying small fixed wing aircraft. I was what's called a short takeoff and landing expert, fly anything small. And we had multiple mission sets. It was an absolute elite unit with some of the most amazing human beings. doing some elite things that the world will never know about. Some of them they made movies about that I can allude to, but for the most part, the things that we did, this was like the dream job for a guy who was in the flying airplanes, for a guy who was in some cool stuff. And man, I had an amazing time.
Sometime when you and I are together and we don't have listeners from around the world listening, I'll be grilling you on some of those stories, but not for today. That's man to man, beer to beer, buddy. So I'm looking forward to it. You said this is my dream job, and I'm sure it was. I'm also sure it was your wife's nightmare job. You have now gone from, in quotes, the milk runs, the highly reliable flights that you were on. I mean, that was a super relatively safe plane. Now you are in harm's way frequently. What was this pivot like in your family?
The interesting thing was when I got done with the interview process, it's several days long and it's what's called assessment and selection. When you get done with that, they basically say, hey, we want to make you an offer and you have a specified amount of time to make a decision. So I went back to my wife and gave her the little bit of information that I could give her. And she says, what's the best case scenario? I says, the best case scenario is this. And it was more in alignment with kind of our living situation and family stuff. And then she said, what's the worst case scenario? I says, well, I'd be gone for 60 days at a time. She goes, okay, well, that's not as bad as your current environment. I go, yeah, because we're limited based on the amount of work that we're doing. She goes, okay. And she goes, what else is bad about it? I go, well, there's sometimes that I could just disappear off the face of the earth for 60 days and you won't hear from me for 60 days. She goes, but it's limited to 60 days. I go, yes. She goes, okay. And she says, what do you need to make a decision? I says, well, I need your blessing. I says, I'm going to call your dad because he's retired military. I'm going to get his blessing. And then I'm going to call my uncle, my grandfather's youngest brother, who was special forces and had done every special duty that the Army had. And I got his perspective and got his blessing. And I took the job.
Mm.
And the coolest thing is, as you talk about the way you set that up, John, is my wife never once asked me what it was that I did. My wife never asked me once where I was going. She never questioned and said, "Oh, are you lying to me?" or anything like that. She just trusted I was getting the job done, and it allowed me to do what I needed to do to serve the nation in the capacity that they had hired me to do. She, dove deeper into her work as a pharmacist and her level
Right.
of brilliance working in the HIV/AIDS space, and we were able to continue to coexist. And it was funny because she never knew what I did until right before my last deployment. I was getting promoted to major, and my commander's promoting me. My commander's telling, we had this promotion ceremony. My wife's in the front row, my mom's in the front row, one of my grandmothers, an aunt, and some of my siblings. And the commander starts talking about what it is that we do in that space, not anything classified, but some of the stuff that's best that the families didn't know. And all the guys in the back are going, no, don't say that. And it was kind of like, oh man, I hope nothing happens to me now, my last deployment. Thankfully, obviously nothing happened. But up until that point, she had no clue about anything other than what type of airplane that I flew. That was about all she knew.
Whew. I'm just like I feel like I'm sitting somewhere in that hangar. So proud of you, man. Like just so proud of the journey you've been on and the family that you're building up and the country that you're serving and the lives you're elevating. You fly the KC-46. You become a squadron commander of that. What is a KC-46?
So KC-46, it's a Boeing 767-200 commercial aircraft, but then the military took it and they outfitted it to pass fuel to other aircraft and to be able to receive fuel. And so imagine it's a flying gas tank, and we're at 20 something thousand feet in the sky doing 400 to 500 miles an hour. And we come up right behind another airplane and we can pass fuel or we can receive fuel. And then to up the ante, we could do it in the dark. And so it was a really amazing airplane. It's one of the newest airplanes that the Air Force has in its inventory. I wanted to fly a military aircraft one last time in my career, and I applied and thought this would be awesome. And then was selected to be a squadron commander and beyond humbled at that opportunity to lead people at the squadron level, and beyond humbled and grateful to have the opportunity to just do one last hurrah
Mm.
and make an impact.
So a couple questions about this before we pivot big time. But what 20 years plus active duty? What did that time teach you about leadership?
Whew. You know, I learned a lot about leadership over the course of my career, John. And I was having a conversation recently with someone, and I think a lot of people this would resonate with is that a lot of the lessons we learn about leadership aren't really from the good leaders. Sadly, they're actually from the bad leaders.
Uh,
And so for me, as I was going throughout my career, I always was reminded that voice in the back of my head of my mom talking to me about when she was enlisting the army and how she was treated and how she was made to feel. And so for me, I wanted to make certain that I never made anybody feel the way people made her feel as a
uh,
person and as someone who raised their hand voluntarily to serve this nation. And so I was always looking to figure out how could I be the best version of myself and be a great leader. And then I was always looking to figure out are there good leaders that I could follow and that I could emulate. And then when I would see those, of course, I would try to learn more. And then when I would see the ones that were clearly bad leaders, I would try to figure out what could I do to ensure that I never became like them.
right.
And so I learned lessons from good leaders, lessons from bad leaders, and then lessons that me and my peers that we shared with each other about what we never wanted to become by what we were seeing every single day as we served.
I know you've said we don't rise to the occasion, we fall to our level of training.
Yeah.
Tell me what that means.
Y- You know, oftentimes people would say, "Oh, you'll rise to the occasion." Well, I vehemently disagree. When you were faced with a sudden challenge, it's imperative that you have already been prepared for that. And so you can't rise to the occasion and come up with something magical and mythical in that moment. You know, flying airplanes, one of the things that we would say is, I'd rather be lucky than good any day, right? But on the other side of that, part of that luck is when your preparation meets the opportunity in that challenge. And so in that moment, while some people think they're going to rise to the challenge that they've never prepared for, you're actually going to fall to that level of training and preparation that you've experienced and that you've consciously been intentionally about doing to ensure that you're always ready. You know, and they also say if you stay ready, you don't have to get ready. And so I firmly believe that no, people aren't going to rise to the challenge. People are going to fall to the level of their training, the level of their preparation, and the level of their experiences. And that's going to allow them to handle whatever they're faced with.
You're a big trust guy.
Oh, yeah.
So tell me what this one means. Leaders who don't trust their people will eventually lead people who don't trust them.
Leading people that don't trust them is probably not the way that I would say it. However, they will have people that don't trust them following them. And there's a difference between leading people and people following you. Those are two completely different things. And so, regardless of how we say it, if you have people that don't trust you and they're in your organization and you're actually in a titled role in that organization, ideally a leader in that organization, then if they don't trust you, they're not going to be committed to you. They're not going to be committed to the mission. And they know that, or they presumably assume that you don't have their best interest in mind. And if you, as a person who has a title and are leading in an organization, have the perception that you don't have your people's best interests in mind and they are not committed to you, then how are you going to get the best out of them? And then imagine that in a combat environment, right? Like, oh, we have to charge the hill. Well, why are we going to do that? I don't trust that you're going to actually keep me safe. Well, like, and then in real life, we're in the combat of life and we're in the combat of work. If I don't trust that you, John, are going to actually lead me and that you, John, have my best interests in mind and that you, John, are going to look out for me and that you're going to take care of me and that you're going to look out for my best interests, then I have no interest in following you and I have no reason to follow you to
Right.
get the mission done.
So this is just on my mind, man. So I've had the honor of speaking with the leaders of Air Force One and JSOC and Fort Bragg and all over the country at our military bases. And there's a certain professionalism and oh man, there's just like it's like game seven of the World Series when you're on these bases and when you're with these crews. It's awesome. And then I'll say the airline, you're with American Airlines. Southwest Airlines, Delta, United, doesn't really matter the airline, but it seemed my question is, how do you get up when you're not flying into Baghdad, you're picking up passengers in Toledo and you're dropping them off in Houston, and then from Houston into Philly, and then from Philly you're going to spend the night and do the same trip again the following day and the following day, and then off for four. The reason why I think this question matters is this is where most of us live,
Mm,
right? I
yes.
mean, most of us aren't in game seven. Most of us are just doing the monotony, misery of life. And we yawn our way through it sometimes if we're not careful. And I know you aren't yawning, you're excelling. So, how have you pivoted into this next profession, this next chapter of your life where you realize, man, it is game seven, let's go?
For me, John, it's about impact. I go back to that statement I said earlier, making my dash count. I have a limited amount of time on this earth, and with that limited amount of time, what am I going to do with it? I do agree with you. Most of us are yawning through life, and what I say is that most of us are just existing and we're not living. For me, when I go out there and fly that airplane, tomorrow I'll jump on a flight and go down to Dallas and fly a flight to Paris. And yeah, it's going to be 300 people in the back of the airplane. They don't know me from Adam. I don't know them. Maybe I'll get to interact with a few people on there. But if nothing else, what happens when I see that young kid that might not even speak my language that says, "Can I see the cockpit?" And I go, "Come on up here, kid." And I let him sit there and I take a picture. In that moment, I mattered. In that moment, he mattered. And in that moment, my presence mattered. And so for me, that's something that gets me up. That's something that gets me excited. What happens when I show up to work and that flight attendant, you don't realize why she's still working. You don't realize that she just lost her spouse. You don't realize that she just lost her child or that she just got diagnosed with cancer. And making her feel special by just coming all the way to the back of the airplane before everybody loads up on that airplane and just saying, "Hey, I don't need any snacks or drinks. I just came back to say hello, introduce myself. I'm Jason. I'm the first officer today. I just want to know your name and put a name with a face." And how much different did that make her feel? Because nobody else has done that.
Yes.
So for me, those are the things that get me up. Those are the things that allow me to feel like I'm actually living this life and making an impact with my presence and how I communicate with people, how I connect with people. In that split moment that we're on the other side of TSA, and I get to say, "Hey, John, it was really fantastic meeting you. Thanks for sharing with me just a snippet of your life. If ever I can help support you, you let me know. You have a fantastic day. Be amazing and make sure that the world knows that you left an impact." That's what this is
What
about.
an awesome leader, man. I mean, I hope folks are listening to this not from a military perspective necessarily or airline, but just humble leadership, meeting people where they are, reminding them they matter, reminding them we don't get from A to B without them. So, my friend, where can we learn more, not only about the routes you're flying for American Airlines, but maybe even more importantly, the words you're speaking, the coaching that you're doing, the lives you're impacting? Where do we hang out with you online?
Yeah, my website is nofailtrust.com. 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 It's all about being able to deliver when it matters most. And that to me is what life is about. If folks want to find me, they can also email me at jason@nofailtrust.com.
Jason, we have 7 questions that tether all of our mighty servant guests together. So buckle up. You know where the oxygen mask is. Should you need it, put it on yourself first before you help others. So here we go. What has been the most impactful book you've ever read?
How to win friends and influence people.
What's one positive characteristic or one trait that you possessed as a little kid growing up in Oakland, but you wish you exhibited as brilliantly today?
Asking questions.
If your home caught fire and all living things are out and you have an opportunity of running back into that house and grab one item, what's the one thing you would come racing back outside with?
Nothing.
Let it burn, huh?
Yeah, we've been near wildfires and we had this conversation. Eh, There's a lot of memories in here. I don't have the space to grab it all. So why am I going to go and grab anything? I'm going to sit out there and make certain that I comfort my wife and my daughter.
If you could sit on a bench on a gorgeous day and have a long conversation with anyone living or deceased, who do you want next to you?
My grandfather.
What's the best advice your grandfather or anyone else ever gave you?
Live life to the fullest. You only get it once.
Oof. What advice would you give that 20-year-old version of you shopping for stereos?
You are enough. You matter. And you don't need the external validation to know that you are enough.
When did you realize that?
I'm still learning it, John.
Lieutenant Colonel Jason O. Harris, who clearly does matter. It has been said that all great people can have their lives summed up in one sentence. How would you like yours to read?
He made his dash count.
Man, what an awesome conversation with my pilot, my friend, our servant today, Jason O. Harris. Jason, I appreciate you serving. I appreciate you sharing your heart, and I appreciate you making your dash matter.
Thank you so much for having me, John. This conversation is such a blessing. And I'm truly, truly grateful because you've asked me questions that other people have yet to ask me. So thank you.
My friends, you're hearing the voice of my buddy. His name is Lieutenant Colonel Jason O. Harris. My name is John O'Leary, and today is our day. What a gift it is. Live inspired.
Well, my friends, one of my favorite takeaways from this conversation with Jason is that you don't rise to the occasion, you fall to the level of your training. It's so powerful. Jason reminds us that trust is not built when everything is easy. Instead, it is built in moments that test you. When you do, in fact, what you said you were going to do. When you show up in life with integrity. When you choose courage over comfort. When you decide to be someone else that others can actually look up to and count on. And here's the beautiful part. It's really important. You don't need to be a cockpit pilot or in a combat zone or a corner office to practice this each day in your lives. You can build trust right where you are as you are today. If you enjoyed today's episode, you will probably love our military and first responders playlist. It's a powerful collection of conversations about life and love and service with veterans and first responders. You can hear how Forrest Gump continues to influence Gary Sinise, Jim Lovell's journey to the dark side of the moon and back from Apollo 13, how ex-Special Agent Eva Pomporis lives fiercely, and so much more. You can listen to the Military and First Responders playlist right now by cruising over to me to johnolearyinspires.com/podcast. In the show notes for today's episode, we will have a link to the Military and First Responders playlist. Again, just cruise over right now to johnolearyinspires.com/podcast. My friends, I want to thank you for tuning in to our conversation today with Jason O. Harris. And I want to thank you also for knowing what I know to be true, that the foundation is firm, that the headwind we face may be real, but the best is yet to come. So for this time and until next time, my name is John O'Leary. Today is our day. What a gift. Live with your soul on fire.
Keeley Companies was started almost 50 years ago by the one and only Larry Keeley. What started as a small family-owned paving company in St. Louis has grown to a nationally known full-service construction, development, and restoration partner. Larry the Legend, as he is affectionately known, has been a part of this growth every step of the way and continues to provide guidance as his son, Rusty, my buddy, drives their vision and achieves results on purpose. His unwavering foundation of a family culture with a focus on people has gotten Keeley Companies to where they are today, and their journey is truly just beginning. To learn more about Larry the Legend and Keeley Companies, check them out at KeeleyCompanies.com.